Hi, welcome to CALICon 2020. This session is Born Digital, the art of archiving photos with script and batch processing. Let's introduce our speakers.
I'm Rachel Evans, the Metadata Services Librarian at UGA Law Library.
And I'm Leslie Grove, one of the web developers also at the University of Georgia School of Law Library.
Sharon Bradley. I'm formerly the Special Collections Librarian at UGA and now at Mercer University, and I'm the Digital and Scholarly Resources Librarian. The UGA Law Library was an early adopter of bPress's Digital Commons. Now, initially, the Digital Commons was promoted as a mechanism to capture the scholarly output of an institution, and that generally meant faculty publications. At that point in time, I was actually the faculty services librarian and was involved with promoting the repository to our faculty and explaining its long-term importance to measures of scholarly impact. But relatively early on, we knew we wanted to capture as much of the intellectual activity of the institution as possible. And that would include any items created by law school departments or about the law school. Initially, the photographs collection, and I put air quotes around photographs collection, contained only historical images. Prints of speakers and events from the physical archives were scanned and uploaded individually. Photographs of the portrait collection and other items from our art collection were added. These digitized images became part of the school's online archives. In general, this online photograph collection remained small. The photographs added were all tied in some way to our special collections and limited to what I, as the then special collections librarian, was able to scan, load, and catalog individually. The school's Office of Communications and Public Relations take photographs at many events at the school. And these events were frequently also part of the repository in the form of a publication, a transcript, or a recorded presentation, but not the photographs taken by the communications office. Those were loaded to the law school's public web server. Over the years, the website's framework evolved, and various iterations of photo galleries were used by the communications office to present small collections of images to the public following the events. In the fall of 2019, on the heels of a CALICon session titled Automating Processing and Intake in the Institutional Repository with Python, we were inspired to begin the task of preserving the born digital images then in the various photo galleries. Despite what we knew was going to be a lot of work, the project was going to be a win-win all around.
In the session that inspired the bulk of this project, although it really dealt with PDFs and automating PDF intake and using scripts to pull certain data from that, as we sat there next to each other, we couldn't help but think of what Sharon was just talking about, that we had this looming web upgrade, we had all these digital born photos, and we did not have a way to capture that many photographs all at once in advance of this upgrade. And we knew that was coming this fall 2020, and we were already kind of thinking about how to do that. Also, that summer at CALICon, the other session that Leslie attended, From Concept to Concrete, and it was inspiring as well. At the time, we thought perhaps some of what she learned in that session about Google Vision could be used with this other project to identify objects and text. And so I'm going to let Leslie talk a little bit about Google Vision.
So it's a free API from Google, and you can test it online, actually. If you go to cloud.google.com/vision, you can test this out by uploading whatever photo you like. So we got a lot of information out of the photographs, and it was kind of striking how accurate some of the data was that Google came up with. Like, for instance, it identified parties as parties. It sometimes looked at photographs of people and said, what their mood was, and this person's wearing a tie, and things like that. So it was great information, but not really something we could use for our purposes. So we ended up not using that for the photo archiving project, but we were able to use it for a different project, and that was the incoming class photos. So this is a little bit of an aside, but it turned out to be a real time saver when we received hundreds of photographs of our 1Ls, incoming students. And there was one photograph of the student holding a sign with their name and ID number. And then the following photograph was like the proper photograph. So this was a way of, identifying everybody. And so I wrote a script using the Google Vision API that would read the sign and then rename the following photograph with their ID number. And that worked really well, except it still required a human to look at it because there were certain instances when the students' print on their jacket or shirt looked like letters or numbers to the AI. So that was kind of interesting. So you still need a human to check these things.
I love that little takeaway from the session. And the reason we're including that in this session, again, it seems like a bit of an aside, but you never know what the tiny bit you'll learn from a Cali session is the little nugget that you can turn around and use for your own project. So that's why we're mentioning it here, especially as we're all working from home and we're uncertain of what the fall is going to look like. That may be the nugget that some of you can, take and use for your own incoming students, especially if you're getting a lot of photographs this time around and there's a lot of distance work. So with that in mind, we're going to jump back to the main project here, and this is our project timeline. So this slide can show you just sort of a big picture of what we were looking at. This was, again, something we were thinking about before we went to Cali 2019. Leslie and I had worked a long time together in the IT department, both as web developers, and we were both members of the web team before I took a librarian position at the law library. So we already had a connection going with our what we were going to do about Drupal 7 needing to go to Drupal 8. We had so much content. And now I was in a better role to work more collaboratively with Sharon as far as our archives were concerned, especially the repository. And so this just seemed like the perfect meeting point for the three of us to get this content off the web. So fall 2019, Sharon and I worked very closely to really wrap our heads around the structural changes that needed to take place in Digital Commons and what that basic information was that we would need to get from Leslie as she created her scripts. So this was a pretty big process, and this was happening fall 2019, so that we were at the point in January 2020 where Leslie was ready to do some big tests with the scripts. And I was able to load those tests into our sandbox of Digital Commons, and we were able to see what this was really going to start looking like. But, this for all three of us this entire time kind of taking place on the back burner. And then the COVID closures happened in March. For us, this was early March. And honestly, it was just the right timing. It was a perfect example of something that we could do from home. And the three of us, even with Sharon at Mercer now, continued working on documentation.
One of the really important things in a project like this is the original setup, your initial plan. If you do a lot of planning on the front end, then you'll have less to fix as things go along. So deciding what your metadata fields are important. The other thing to think about is how you organize the material. And this is going to be very unique to each institution. It can't be too broad or you end up with too many items in one category.
Echoing what Sharon said about not having things too broad, but not having them too narrow. The four that are on the slide, those four fields have been a lifesaver. If we had more required fields, we might not have enough data to fill them. That would have been an issue with a project that had such a large amount of digital media coming into it. As I reviewed them, I was able to get feedback using this Google Sheet from our communications and public relations department head. And so this Google Sheet, although it seems like it plays a small role in this project, it was one of those tools that we needed to establish some of that framework early on, so that the project could move along more smoothly at the stage that I'm at right now, where I'm actually cleaning up the data. So this is an excerpt from what Leslie created for us that was able to do all of this automation on the left, and on the right is the result. And what Leslie delivered to me, kind of going back to that timeline we showed you early on, over the course of April, was 3 Excel spreadsheets. These were actually CSV files, but I was able to work with these and manipulate them, and I'm still cleaning them up in Excel. She looked at the different types of image galleries that we had over time. This selection of image galleries ranged from photographs from 2001 until 2015. And so the format had changed on the web during that time, and I'm going to let Leslie share what the different variations were and why it required more than one script.
So starting in '01, we had our fancy HTML pages with tiny thumbnails of photos, as you can see in the slide. And though that type of page went through a few iterations, put it on the web, we started using Flash, and that was great for a while. That looked really slick. And then in 2015, we started using Drupal. Given this, this broad range of the way the photos were stored, the consistent good thing was that all the photos were on our own server, and so each one had its own URL already. So that was great. We didn't have to, move things around. So it was just a matter of writing scripts to either parse the HTML or to go into the server in the file structure and pull out the photos, So I decided to use PHP for this, although the original session that we saw at the Cali conference talked about using Python. I'm much more familiar with PHP, and any modern scripting language would probably work for this. There were a couple of gotchas, some troubleshooting that needed to be done. One thing that happened was a lot of the text was originally from Microsoft Word or other Microsoft products that have the smart quotes. So these are the curly quotes instead of the straight quotes, which I think is typographically proper actually, but a lot of scripts don't know how to interpret that. So we were ending up with like odd looking percentages and characters. And so one of the other challenges was dealing with dates, because on our initial list of galleries, the date was sometimes, April 2010, or, it was like date, day, month, year, or something like that. So I wrote some regular expressions to try to parse the dates.
So with the 3 scripts, Leslie was able to digital images from these different time ranges. For the first, this first script was used for those Drupal-based pages, and we had more than 700, almost 800 photographs. For script 2, this was between 2013 and 2014 that these galleries were created, and they were all based in Flash. We had 88 galleries like this with 1,273 individual images. And for script 3, now this is the bulk, we had 465 image galleries between 2001 and 2013, and Leslie harvested more than 10,000 photographs with script number 3. It was more than 600 galleries that these photographs came from.
Well, speaking for Leslie and Rachel and myself, we want to thank John Beatty and Jesse Bowman and Stephen Martone for their inspiring presentations in June of 2019. Without their inspiration and the groundwork that those sessions shared, this project probably would not have been possible. Questions? We've included our email addresses, and of course, thanks for your attention.